The rain wasn't just falling, it was weeping. Each fat drop splattered against my windshield, blurring the already dim landscape of the winding country road. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white, my chest aching with a cold, hollow pain that had nothing to do with the weather. My phone, a silent accusation, lay face down on the passenger seat, a testament to the argument that had just ended not with a bang, but with a whimper and a dial tone. 7 years. Gone. Just like that. I was headed back to my small town, back to my quiet life, to the empty house that now felt even emptier. My clinic, hopeful pause, was miles behind me, a beacon of purpose in a life that suddenly felt adrift. I just wanted to be home, to curl up with a sad movie and pretend that the ache in my gut wasn't the gaping wound of a future I'd painstakingly built, now demolished. Then I saw him. Or rather, I almost didn't see him. A dark shape, barely discernible against the sodden ditch, too still for an animal just resting. My heart, already heavy, clenched with a familiar urgency. It was the same feeling that always hit me when I saw a creature in distress. A primal pull to help, to heal. It was probably why I became a vet. It was definitely why I was now pulling my old Subaru to the shoulder, the tires spitting gravel. "Please don't be too late," I whispered, my voice raw. I grabbed my emergency kit from the back, the heavy canvas bag slung over my shoulder, the sterile smell a comforting anchor in the chaos of my emotions. The rain plastered my hair to my face as I stumbled towards the ditch. And there he was. Not a dog, not exactly. He was huge. So big he barely fit in the shallow trench. His fur, matted with mud and what looked like blood, was a dark, impenetrable black, even darker than the stormy sky. One massive paw was twisted at an unnatural angle and a low, guttural whimper escaped his throat, a sound of profound agony that tore straight through my own misery. His eyes, when they finally opened, were a startling, intelligent gold flickering with pain and something else. Something wild and ancient that sent a shiver down my spine. Fear, sharp and sudden, pricked at me. This wasn't a golden retriever or a Labrador. This was something else entirely. A wolf, maybe? But wolves didn't usually wander this close to suburban roads, especially not one this majestic, even in his current state. And he was clearly injured badly. "Hey there, big guy," I murmured, trying to keep my voice calm, professional. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." He whined again, a deeper sound this time, and tried to lift his head. It was a struggle. His breathing was shallow, ragged. I could see the dark, sticky patch on his flank, even through the mud. A bullet wound. My stomach dropped. Who would do this? My vet instincts kicked in, overriding my fear. This animal was dying. And I wouldn't leave him. Not after everything. Not when I could help. "All right, big guy," I said, forcing a cheerful tone I didn't feel. "Let's get you out of this rain." Getting him into the car was an ordeal. He was heavy, surprisingly heavy, and every movement seemed to send jolts of pain through his massive frame. He didn't fight me, though. He whimpered, yes, and his golden eyes tracked my every move with an unnerving intensity. But he allowed me to maneuver him, to half-drag, half-coax his enormous body onto the back seat, carefully laying him across the folded-down seats of my SUV. The interior was immediately coated in mud, blood, and the earthy, wild scent of him. I didn't care. The drive to the clinic was a blur. I called my only assistant, Clara, but got no answer. She was probably out of town. It was just me. Just me, the storm, and this magnificent wounded creature fighting for his life in the back of my car. When I finally pulled into the clinic parking lot, the rain had eased to a drizzle, but the tension in my chest hadn't. I backed the car up to the emergency entrance, the one with the oversized doors meant for large animals. I knew with a certainty that chilled me, that if he died, if I couldn't save him, it would break something inside me that was already cracked. He was bleeding more freely now. His whimpers were fainter, more desperate. His golden eyes, usually so bright, were glazing over. "No," I whispered, fumbling with the door. "Not on my watch, big guy. Not tonight." As I gently slid him onto the gurney, his head lolled against my arm. I could feel the heat radiating from him, even through his matted fur. And then his eyes, those incredible golden eyes, met mine. For a fleeting second, the pain seemed to recede, replaced by a deep, almost human intelligence. A plea, a silent promise, an acknowledgement that stole my breath. And then he went limp. My heart hammered against my ribs. No, no, no. I cried, pushing him into the emergency surgery room. Don't you dare give up on me. I worked through the night, a frantic dance of adrenaline and desperation. The bullet was deep, dangerously close to a major artery. His pulse was weak, his breathing erratic. I administered fluids, antibiotics, pain medication. I shaved away the matted fur, cleaned the wound, sterilized my instruments. The smell of blood, of antiseptic, filled the air. My hands, usually so steady, trembled with the effort, with the fear. I lost track of time. Hours passed. The storm outside eventually subsided, replaced by the hushed silence of pre-dawn. My clothes were soaked, smeared with mud and blood. My hair was a wild mess. My own exhaustion was a distant hum, drowned out by the urgent drumbeat of the operating table. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I extracted the bullet. It was a heavy, deformed slug stained crimson. I stitched him up, carefully, meticulously, murmuring reassurances to his unconscious form. He was stable. Barely. I sat beside him on a stool, just watching him breathe, listening to the steady beep of the monitor. The golden eyes were closed now, hidden by dark lashes. His massive chest rose and fell with a slow, measured rhythm. He was still alive. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so strong it almost brought me to my knees. I laid my head against his thick, soft fur, feeling the warmth of him, the steady thrum of life beneath my ear. The smell of wild earth and animal was still there, but now, mixed with the clean scent of antiseptic, it was almost comforting. You're going to be okay, big guy, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. You're safe now. You're home. Home. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd just lost my own sense of home, and here I was, offering it to a creature I'd dragged from a ditch. But looking at his still form, at the gentle rise and fall of his chest, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. A fragile, wounded hope, but hope nonetheless. I didn't know who or what he was or where he came from. I only knew that I had saved him. And for the first time since my world imploded, I didn't feel quite so alone. The following days bled into each other, a soft, dreamlike blur of beeping monitors, hushed footsteps, and the low, steady rumble of his breathing. I named him Jasper. Felt right, a strong, grounded name for a creature so powerful and wild. He was still a mystery, still in that liminal state between unconsciousness and full awareness. I spent every spare moment by his side, checking his vitals, changing his bandages, and just talking to him. I talked about my day at the clinic, about the eccentric cat who refused to eat anything but tuna, about the elderly golden retriever I'd been treating for arthritis. It was a one-sided conversation, of course, but it filled the silence that had become a constant companion since David left. He never woke up, not fully, but he wasn't unresponsive. His golden eyes would flutter open sometimes, cloudy with fever and pain, and they'd fix on me with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. He'd shift his massive head to nuzzle my hand when I was changing his bag, a low, throaty purr vibrating through his chest. It was a strange sort of communication, a silent, unspoken language of trust. Clara, my assistant, returned from her trip a week after I'd found him. She walked into the back room, her bright, bubbly energy deflating the moment she saw him. "Ellie, what in the world?" she breathed, her eyes wide as she took in Jasper's immense form on the surgical table. "He's a stray," I said, the lie feeling both necessary and flimsy. "Found him on the side of the road. Bullet wound." Clara, bless her, didn't question it further. She knew my heart was bigger than my brain sometimes, and she trusted my judgment. But I could see the questions in her eyes, questions I didn't have the answers to myself. Who was he, what was he, and why did he look more like a mythological creature than a common canine? She was wary around him, I could tell, but professional. She helped me with his 4 drips, changed his bandages, and never once flinched at the sight of him. After 2 weeks, the fever finally broke. One morning, I came in to find Jasper's golden eyes wide open and clear, watching my every move as I prepared a fresh bowl of water. He wasn't groggy or disoriented. He was alert, watchful. When I approached the table, he pushed himself up, a deep rumble sounding in his chest. It wasn't a growl, but it was close, a warning. "Whoa, easy there, big guy," I said, putting the bowl down carefully. "You're still weak. Take it easy." His eyes, full of that unsettling intelligence, narrowed. He sniffed the air, and for a moment his gaze didn't rest on me but on the clinic door. A low growl rumbled in his throat, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. It was the same sound of possessive aggression I'd heard from a Doberman once, the kind that promised violence. My blood ran cold. Then his gaze returned to me, and the tension seemed to melt out of his massive body. He padded to the edge of the surgical table, carefully placing his huge head in my lap. The action was so out of character for the creature I had just seen that it took my breath away. He was still an apex predator, a creature of raw, untamed power, but he was also loyal, devoted. He nuzzled my hand with a soft, warm nose, and I felt the last vestiges of my fear drain away, replaced by a wave of affection so profound it ached. From that moment on, his recovery was miraculous. The stitches healed with an alarming speed, the mangy fur grew back in a rich velvety coat of black, and he was back on his paws, though he still favored the wounded one. He followed me everywhere. To the supply closet, to the front desk, even to the bathroom, standing guard outside the door. He was a silent shadow, a constant presence that was both unnerving and deeply comforting. He wasn't a dog, that much was clear, but he was my shadow. He would sit by my feet as I worked, his head on his paws, his golden eyes never leaving me. This possessive loyalty became even more apparent when clients came in. He was a perfect gentleman to me and Clara, but the moment another person, especially a man, entered the room, the low growl would start up, a soft, threatening sound that would make them stop in their tracks. I'd have to calm him, tell him it was okay, and then he would begrudgingly back down, but his eyes would never leave the person, tracking their every move with a territorial ferocity that made my clients' faces go pale. I started keeping him in the back room when I knew I had a full schedule, explaining his nervousness to a few concerned clients. One evening I was cleaning up the front lobby after a long, draining day. I'd been so focused on getting the last bit of paperwork done that I hadn't noticed the car that had pulled up outside. The door chimed, and a man I didn't recognize walked in, his face etched with concern. He was tall, with a confident, easy smile, but there was something about the way he held himself that put me on edge. "Hi," he said, his voice smooth and friendly. "My name is Jacob. I'm new to town and I'm just looking for a good vet. My old one retired and, well, I heard good things about you." Before I could even smile, a low, menacing growl rumbled from the back room. Jacob's smile faltered. "Is everything okay back there?" he asked, a flicker of something in his eyes. I forced a laugh. "Oh, that's just my new dog. He's a little protective. We're working on it." The growl intensified, a sound of pure, unadulterated aggression. Jasper wasn't just growling. He was actively moving. I could hear his heavy paws thudding against the floor of the hallway. "Ellie, get him," Clara called from the back. "He's going crazy." I raced into the hallway, my heart pounding. Jasper was at the front door, his teeth bared in a snarl, a terrifying guttural sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the clinic. He wasn't growling at me or Clara, but at the man Jacob, who was now standing frozen in the lobby, his easy smile gone. "Jasper, no," I commanded, but the word had no effect. He was beyond my control, a wild beast. The man Jacob seemed to understand. He took a step back, his hands held up in a gesture of surrender. All right, I get it. I'll come back later." I wanted to apologize, to explain, but the words were stuck in my throat. As soon as Jacob was out the door and in his car, Jasper's body went slack. He padded back over to me, nudging his head into my hand with a low, apologetic whine. I knelt down and hugged him, burying my face in his thick fur. "What was that?" Clara asked, her face pale. "I don't know," I said honestly, scratching behind his ears. "I don't know." That night, back at the empty house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had brought something home that I couldn't possibly understand. As I curled up on the couch, the TV a low murmur in the background, Jasper lay on the rug in front of the fireplace, his massive body a dark, unmoving shadow. He was more than a dog, more than an animal. He was a protector, a sentinel. His presence in my life was a strange, disquieting comfort. I reached out a hand and he immediately lifted his head, his golden eyes meeting mine. They were so expressive, so intelligent. He was still a mystery, a beautiful, frightening mystery. I had no idea what to do with him or how to explain him to the world, but as I ran my fingers through his thick fur, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer alone. He had filled the quiet spaces David had left behind, a wild, possessive presence that was both a burden and a blessing. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a low, rumbling vibration in the floor, the sound of him watching over me, a silent, powerful guardian. Jasper's rapid recovery was a constant source of wonder and concern. Within a few weeks, the deep, ragged bullet wound on his flank was nothing but a faint, silvery scar hidden beneath his thick black fur. His limp had disappeared entirely, and he was a whirlwind of restless energy, pacing the back rooms of the clinic with a predatory grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. He was a creature built for open spaces, for running, and being cooped up in the small vet clinic was starting to take its toll on him. My small, quiet life was also taking a hit. I was tired, constantly on edge, juggling my regular clients with the demands of a patient who wasn't a patient anymore. Jasper was my new normal. We'd go for long runs every morning before the clinic opened, me huffing and puffing on the trail behind my house while he loped effortlessly through the trees, a dark blur of motion. He always kept me in sight, though, and would pause every few moments to look back at me, his golden eyes filled with a surprising mixture of impatience and affection. His possessiveness, once a rare occurrence, became a defining trait. It was an unspoken, constant force. If Clara got too close to me at the front desk, he would stand between us, his body a silent shield. If a delivery man came to the door, a low rumble would start in his chest until they were gone. He was always touching me, his head in my lap, his paw resting on my foot, a constant physical connection that I found myself craving more and more. It was a bizarre, codependent relationship, but after the emptiness of my breakup, I found it filled the lonely space in my heart in a way I hadn't known was possible. One Tuesday evening after a particularly long day, I decided to take a break and sit on my back porch. I grabbed a glass of wine and curled up in a rocking chair, watching the fireflies dance in the deepening twilight. Jasper padded out and laid his head on my feet, his body a warm weight that grounded me. I ran a hand through his fur, my fingers tangling in the thick, soft strands. "You know, you're not a dog, Jasper," I murmured to him. "You're so much more." He made a low sound in his chest, a soft rumble that felt more like a response than a simple animal sound. His golden eyes, luminous in the dark, held a depth that still startled me. The silence was a peaceful balm, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the gentle creak of the rocking chair. But then a noise from the road, a car engine, shattered the calm. I tensed, my hands still on Jasper's fur. The engine sounded familiar. Too familiar. The car, an old, beat-up sedan, pulled into my driveway. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. It was David. He got out of the car, his face a grim mask, his shoulders slumped. He looked tired, older than he had just a few weeks ago. He had a box in his hands filled with a few of my things he'd held onto. Jasper's head shot up. The low, menacing growl began, a soft, dangerous sound that grew in volume as David walked toward the porch. "Ellie." David called out, his voice hesitant. "I just wanted to drop this off. And talk." "David, I don't think that's a good idea," I said, my voice shaking. Jasper stood up, his massive body tensing. He wasn't just growling now. His teeth were bared and a deep snarl ripped from his throat. The sound was terrifying, a pure, animalistic threat that had nothing to do with training or domesticated behavior. David stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "What is that, Ellie?" "Wolf. You can't keep a wolf." "He's not a wolf, he's a..." I trailed off, the lie catching in my throat. I couldn't explain him. I couldn't explain the way he was glaring at David as if he were a threat to my very existence. Jasper took a menacing step forward and David, clearly terrified, took one back. The air crackled with tension. "Jasper, no." I commanded, my heart pounding in my chest. He was too wild, too unpredictable. I had to get David to leave. David, just go. Please. Ellie, what are you doing? David shouted, his voice laced with panic. That thing is dangerous. It could hurt you. He won't hurt me, I said with a certainty that surprised even myself. He's protecting me. He's protecting us. Us. David repeated, his voice incredulous. You and some wild animal? Jasper let out a guttural bark, a short, sharp sound that was a clear challenge. He bared his teeth, the growl turning into a snarl that promised violence. He took another step toward David, his body low to the ground, a predator about to pounce. David threw the box he was holding onto the ground and it burst open, spilling my old books and photos onto the grass. He scrambled back into his car, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life and he sped out of the driveway, gravel spitting from his tires. As soon as he was gone, the tension in Jasper's body drained away. He turned back to me, his golden eyes soft, his tail giving a single gentle wag. He nuzzled his head against my leg, a silent apology. I knelt down and pulled him into a hug. The possessiveness was still there, but it was layered with a deep, protective love. He was more than a dog, more than a pet. He was mine and I was his. The world had just seen a glimpse of it and it was a terrifying thing to witness. I didn't know what to do with a creature that was so loyal, so intelligent, so powerful. I only knew that I wouldn't let him go. As I picked up my scattered things from the lawn, I felt a new sense of purpose settle over me. The old life, the life with David, was officially over. A new, strange, and beautiful life had just begun. A life with a black, possessive dog with golden eyes. A creature who had saved me from my own heartbreak just as I had saved him from a bullet. And I had a feeling that his secrets and mine were only just beginning to unfold. The incident with David was a clear warning. My life had changed and I couldn't keep pretending that Jasper was just a big protective dog. His behavior was too deliberate, his intelligence too pronounced. He wasn't acting on instinct, he was acting on an understanding I couldn't grasp. The possessiveness, the silent shadow, the sheer ferocity he displayed towards anyone he perceived as a threat to me, it all pointed to something far beyond the realm of a normal animal. My days began to revolve around him. I'd wake up, go for a run with him, work at the clinic with him constantly at my side, and come home to an evening spent with him curled up at my feet. The loneliness I had felt after David left was a distant memory, replaced by a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. I was Jasper's. He had made that clear. And in return he was mine. He was the one constant in my new, unpredictable life. We had a routine, a quiet two-person rhythm that was uniquely ours. He'd wait patiently as I made coffee in the morning, his golden eyes watching every move. He'd nudge my hand when he wanted me to scratch behind his ears, and he'd give a low, rumbling groan of pure contentment when I did. He was a creature of habit and his loyalty was absolute. One night, the first full moon since I'd found him, I was exhausted. The clinic had been a revolving door of sick animals all day, and I had stayed late to finish up some paperwork. I got home just as the moon was rising, a huge, luminous orb in the inky black sky. Its light seemed to pour through every window, bathing the house in a soft, ethereal glow. Jasper was restless. He paced the living room, a low, frustrated growl rumbling in his chest. He kept looking at the windows, then at me as if trying to communicate something urgent. "What is it, big guy?" I asked, sinking onto the couch. "You feelin' the moon tonight?" The words were a joke, a tired, offhand comment, but his reaction was anything but. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his golden eyes wide and filled with a desperate intensity. He whined, a sound of pure agony, and a shiver ran down my spine. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. He collapsed to the floor, his body shaking uncontrollably. A high, keening sound tore from his throat, a sound of agony that was so human it chilled me to the bone. I rushed to him, my vet instincts screaming in my head. "Jasper, what's wrong? Are you in pain?" I knelt beside him, my hands flying over his body, searching for the source of his distress. He was shaking, convulsing, his body contracting in a way that had nothing to do with a seizure. He let out a final agonizing cry, and then his body began to change. I stumbled back, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. His massive black fur began to recede, disappearing into his skin. His bones cracked and shifted, a sickening grinding sound that echoed in the silent room. His legs elongated, his paws transformed into hands and feet, his massive muzzle shortened and reshaped into a face, a human face. The process was horrifying, a brutal and violent transformation that I could only watch in stunned silence, my hands clasped over my mouth. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen, trapped by a morbid curiosity and a deep, terrifying fear. The golden eyes were still there, still him, and they were fixed on me, pleading, desperate. Finally, the shaking stopped. He lay on the floor, panting, a thin sheen of sweat on his skin. He was no longer a dog. He was a man. A powerful, muscular man with a thick head of dark hair. He was breathtaking, with a face that looked like it was carved from stone. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and a mouth that was now set in a grim line. He was naked, and his body was a roadmap of scars, a testament to a life of brutal battles. And there on his flank, where the bullet had been, was a perfectly healed silvery scar. He pushed himself up, his muscles bunching as he moved. He was still the same size, the same immense, overwhelming presence, but now he was human. My gaze snagged on his eyes, those familiar, stunning golden eyes, now in a human face. "Jasper," I whispered, my voice a broken, trembling sound. He flinched at his name. He didn't answer. He simply stared at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of relief, fury, and a deep, unreadable sadness. "I need you to stay calm," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was entirely new but utterly familiar. "I know this is a shock." I shook my head, my mind spinning. "Shock? You were a dog. You were an animal. And now you're a man." He finally looked away from me, his gaze sweeping over the room, taking in the small, quiet space with a strange mix of disdain and possession. He was like a king surveying his kingdom, a conqueror claiming a new territory. He then turned back to me, his golden eyes holding a new, fierce light. "I am an alpha," he said, the words heavy with a power I could feel in my bones. "And you, little healer, are my fated mate." The words hit me like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp clarity that explained everything. The possessiveness, the fierce loyalty, the way he had looked at me. It was all a part of a world I didn't know, a world I didn't want to be a part of. He was not a stray dog. He was a creature of a violent, secret world, and he had just claimed me as his own. And I had no idea what to do. I stared at him, my mind a blank slate. The words fated mate hung in the air between us, heavy and foreign. He wasn't a lost animal I'd saved. He was a man, a powerful, naked man with a history I could only guess at, a history written in the scars that covered his body. The possessiveness I had mistaken for devotion, the loyalty I had found so endearing, suddenly felt like a chain. A cold, iron chain that bound me to a stranger. A fated mate? I finally managed to whisper, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "What is that even supposed to mean?" He walked toward me with a slow, deliberate grace, a predator in a human skin. My every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The firelight flickered across his body, highlighting the lean muscle, the brutal power. I had healed him, had touched him, had run my hands through his fur, but this was different. This was intimacy, a profound and terrifying intimacy I was not prepared for. "It means," he said, his voice a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through my bones, "that our wolves have chosen each other. It means we are meant to be together. Forever." He reached out a hand and I flinched, but he didn't touch me. He simply gestured to the side of his stomach, to the faint, silvery scar. "You saved me. You are my healer. The universe has chosen you for me." "The universe didn't choose me," I said, my voice rising with a frantic edge. "I'm a vet. I chose to save a stray dog I found in a ditch. That's all this is." He shook his head, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. It was a beautiful smile, a smile that would have been charming on any other man, but on him it was unnerving, laced with a wild, predatory satisfaction. "You knew," he said, and it wasn't a question. On some level you knew. You could feel it, the pull between us. The loyalty you felt, the way you defended me to your old mate. That's our bond. It's in your blood, little healer. He took another step, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His scent, a mix of pine and steel, was overwhelming. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. And who are you? I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. You're a werewolf? An alpha? I don't know anything about any of this. I don't want to be a part of it. His golden eyes, so familiar and so strange, held mine. My name is Caius, he said. And I was an alpha in hiding. My pack was attacked. I was wounded and I fled. I was running, trying to find a safe place, but my body gave out. You found me. You were my last hope. He didn't mention the bullet, but I saw the scar again. The scar I had helped create. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a storybook romance. This was a story of violence, of battles I didn't understand. I have no interest in your pack wars, I said, my voice shaking. I'm a veterinarian. I heal animals. I have no place in a world with this. I gestured to his naked body, to the raw, untamed power that pulsed from him. You have a place in my world now, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low growl. You are my fated mate. When I reclaim my pack and my territory, you will be my Luna. My queen. The arrogance of it, the sheer audacity, finally snapped the cord of my fear. No. I shouted, the word echoing in the quiet room. I will not be anyone's queen. I will not be your Luna. I am my own person. I have my own life. And I have no interest in being a part of your power struggle. He seemed genuinely surprised by my outburst. He tilted his head, his golden eyes studying me with a new, unsettling interest. The possessiveness in his gaze was no longer charming. It was a threat. You don't understand, he said, his voice hardening. You are mine. We are connected. You can't just walk away from this. Watch me, I said, my voice now laced with defiance. I turned and ran, my feet slapping against the cold wooden floors. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I had to get away from him, away from this terrifying revelation, away from the man who had been my dog. I ran to my bedroom and slammed the door shut, locking it with a trembling hand. I leaned against it, panting, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear his footsteps behind me, a slow, measured tread. He wasn't in a hurry. He knew I was trapped. Ellie, he said from the other side of the door, his voice still low, but now with an undeniable note of command. Open the door. No, I said, my voice small. Just go away. I can't, he said, a note of something that sounded like regret in his voice. I can't go anywhere without you. I slid to the floor, my back against the door, the cold wood a grim comfort. My world had just been turned upside down. The dog I had saved, the creature I had loved and cared for, was a powerful, possessive man who had just announced I was his property. The loneliness I had so desperately fought was gone, replaced by a suffocating, terrifying intimacy. And I had a feeling that this was only the beginning of my new, terrifying life. I was no longer just a vet with a broken heart. I was a woman on the run from her own dog, a woman in a world of alphas and fated mates, and I was utterly, completely out of my depth. I didn't know how long I sat there, my back pressed against the cold wood of the bedroom door, listening to the silence from the other side. My heart still hammered in my chest, a frantic rhythm against the quiet. The man Caius was out there. The man who had been my dog. It was a reality so bizarre, so utterly impossible, that my mind kept trying to reject it. But the sight of him, the memory of his golden eyes and the raw power of his voice, was too vivid to dismiss as a hallucination. The silence stretched, and with it, a new kind of fear began to creep in. It wasn't the fear of a beast, it was the fear of a man. A man who had just claimed me, who had called me his fated mate. I was a 32-year-old veterinarian, a person who dealt with sprained paws and upset stomachs, not with powerful naked men who could turn into wolves and whose very presence felt like a force of nature. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard a soft, scraping sound from the other side of the door. Not a knock. Not a growl. It was the sound of something soft pressing against the wood, a low whine. My breath caught in my throat. "Ellie?" A low voice whispered, and it was him, but it was different. Softer. Almost apologetic. I didn't answer. I just sat there listening, my body tense. "I'm sorry," he said, the words barely audible through the door. "I didn't mean to scare you. It was an overwhelming night for both of us." I scoffed silently. An overwhelming night was running out of gauze during a spaying surgery. Not discovering the stray dog you'd adopted was a supernatural alpha. "I need to get to my clothes," he continued, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. "I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm still injured. The wound is mostly healed, but I'm still weak from the last shift." A part of me, the pragmatic, logical part that had a deep-seated need to fix things, wanted to believe him. A wounded creature still needing help. But another part, the part that was still screaming from the shock, knew better than to trust a man who had lied to me for weeks by pretending to be a dog. "My clothes are in the laundry room," he said, his voice now a low rumble of command, the apology gone. "And I'm hungry. I can smell food. I'm going to wait here for you to open the door. If you don't, well, this door isn't going to hold me for long." A cold dread settled over me. I had just found a man who could turn into a wolf and was now trapped in my own bedroom with him. I had nowhere to go. I was completely alone in the middle of the night with a creature I didn't understand. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to think clearly. Running was not an option. He was faster, stronger, and knew the lay of the land now. Hiding was pointless. He could smell me, hear my every heartbeat. The only choice I had was to face him. I slowly stood up, my legs trembling beneath me. My hand reached for the doorknob. The lock was a useless piece of metal against the kind of power he possessed. I turned it, and with a deep, shaky breath, I opened the door. He was standing there exactly where I had left him. He was still naked, a magnificent, terrifying figure in the soft moonlight. His golden eyes were fixed on me, the possessiveness still there, but now layered with a new expression I couldn't quite decipher. "I'm not your mate," I said, my voice firmer than I thought possible. "I'm a vet. You're an escaped patient. That's all this is." He took a step toward me and I held up a hand. Don't come any closer." He stopped, his jaw tight. "You have no idea what you're talking about. And you have no idea who I am." I shot back, the anger giving me a burst of adrenaline. "I'm not a trophy. I'm not a prize to be won. I'm a person, and I get to choose who I am, what I am, and who I want to be with. And that's not you." He let out a low, frustrated growl. "You don't understand the bond. It's not about choice. It's about destiny. We're meant to be together. And I will not allow you to deny that. I've spent weeks with you. I've watched you. I've listened to you. You are gentle, you are kind, you are a fierce healer. You are perfect for me." The words, instead of being a comfort, made me feel sick to my stomach. He had been watching me, observing me, judging me. My every action, every move, had been under the scrutiny of a wolf in sheep's clothing. He wasn't a hero, he was a stalker. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice now a whisper. He looked at me for a long moment, the anger draining from his face, replaced by a deep, unreadable sadness. "I have nowhere to go," he said, and the words, so simple, were so devastatingly true. "My pack is gone. I'm the last. They're hunting me. If I leave, I die." And there was the truth. The real story, not the one he had told me about being an alpha. He was just a man on the run, a refugee, a survivor. My heart, the part that had ached for him when I'd found him, felt a sharp pang of empathy. The monster, the possessive alpha, was just a man trying to stay alive. "I'm sorry," I said, the words coming out naturally without thought. He simply shook his head, a grim smile on his face. "I'm not. You're my destiny. You're my fated mate. And I'm not going to let you go." He was still a threat, still a terrifying stranger in my home. But now he was a threat with a name, a past, and a desperate plea. And as I looked at the man who had once been my dog, I knew with a sick certainty that my life would never, ever be the same. The next few days were a fragile truce, a tense silence punctuated by the surreal strangeness of our new reality. Caius remained, but he did so as a ghost, a presence that was always there but never quite acknowledged. He found an old pair of David's sweatpants and a t-shirt in a forgotten closet, and the simple clothes made him look less like a terrifying beast and more like a man, albeit a very large, imposing one. His golden eyes, however, were a constant reminder of the wolf beneath the surface. Our conversations were strained, clipped. He was careful not to mention mate or alpha or destiny, and I was careful to avoid eye contact, a survival mechanism I had learned during my time at vet school. We moved around each other in the small house, a dance of avoidance and unspoken needs. I'd leave a plate of food on the counter for him, and when I returned it would be gone. He'd watch me from a distance as I worked on my laptop or graded paperwork, his presence a silent weight in the room. The house, once an empty shell, was now filled with a living, breathing tension. The silence was not empty. It was filled with his watchful gaze, the quiet click of his nails against the hardwood floor, the low rumble of his breathing when he slept on the rug in the living room. One afternoon I was at the clinic going over some charts, when Claire came into my office, a worried look on her face. "Ellie, that man from a few weeks ago, the one with the dog," she began, her voice low. "Jacob?" asked, my heart sinking. "He was just here," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "He was asking about you, if you were still working with that large animal you found. He was asking if it was a wolf." A cold fear, sharp and immediate, pierced through me. He was still looking for Caius. "What did you tell him?" I asked, my voice tight. "I said he was fine," she said. "And I told him you were busy, that you were taking a few days off." He seemed disappointed. "He left a card for you." I took the card from her hand. It was a business card. Dr. Jacob Reed. The logo on the card was a sleek silver wolf howling at the moon. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just a new resident looking for a vet. He was one of them. He was hunting Caius. I left work early, my mind a frantic mess of fear and confusion. I knew I couldn't keep this from Caius. He had a right to know. I found him in the living room, staring out the window, his expression unreadable. "Someone was asking about you," I said, my voice shaky. "A man. He was at the clinic. He's looking for a wolf. He's one of your people." Caius turned, and his face, usually so guarded, was etched with a grim fury. His golden eyes blazed with a fierce, cold light. "He's not my people," he said, the words a low snarl. "He's from the pack that killed mine. He's their beta. He's the one who shot me." The words hit me like a physical blow. The man I had met, the man with the easy smile, was a killer. He was the reason Caius was a fugitive, the reason he had been a bleeding, mangy mess on the side of the road. "He knows you're here," Caius said, his voice laced with a dangerous calm. "He must have followed me from the auction. He's been hunting me ever since. He was testing you." He took a step toward me, and this time I didn't back away. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with a newfound understanding. He wasn't just a possessive, territorial alpha. He was a survivor, a man hunted by his enemies. "You need to leave," I said, my voice a whisper. "You need to go. If they find you here, they'll..." "They'll what, Ellie?" he interrupted, his voice dropping to a low, seductive growl. "Kill you. Take you. I won't allow it. I will not let them touch what's mine." He reached for my hand and took it in his. His touch was warm and firm, a stark contrast to the cold fear that was gripping me. "I am a fugitive, yes," he said. "But I'm a fugitive with a fated mate. A mate who's a healer. They will not come for me. They will come for us." His words hung in the air, a chilling promise. He was right. I wasn't an innocent bystander anymore. I had healed him. I had given him shelter. I was a part of his story, and his enemies would not stop until they found him. And when they did, they would find me with him. He was a dangerous man, a product of a violent world. But he was also the man who had laid his head on my feet, the one who had whined in pain, the one who had waited for me to open a door. He was a predator, but he was also a wounded animal. And for the first time I looked at him not with fear but with a sudden, overwhelming sense of clarity. My heart had chosen him long before my mind could ever comprehend it. I pulled my hand out of his. He looked at me, a flicker of something close to despair in his golden eyes. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low and broken. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for his face, my fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch. He was still a mystery, a man made of secrets and scars, but he was mine. He was the quiet in the storm, the anchor in my drifting life. "I'm not going to leave you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But you have to tell me everything. Everything. And we have to fight. Together." His golden eyes opened, and a flash of something fierce and wild, something I had not seen before, sparked within them. It was a look of pure, unadulterated possessiveness, and for the first time, it didn't terrify me. It felt like home. I led him to the kitchen, the familiar space a stark contrast to the world we had just stepped into. I moved with a new sense of purpose, a strange, terrifying calm. The man who was once Jasper, a creature of wild instinct and silent loyalty, was now Caius, a fugitive alpha hunted by his enemies. And I, Ellie, a small-town vet with a broken heart, was suddenly his ally. I pulled out 2 mugs, my hands surprisingly steady, and started the coffee pot. The mundane act felt like an anchor in a storm of impossible realities. I had so many questions, so many pieces to fit together. I needed a clear head. Caius watched me, his gaze never leaving my face. The tense, guarded look he'd worn since the shift had softened, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. He pulled out a chair at the small kitchen table and sank into it, his large frame making the wooden chair look impossibly small. "Tell me everything," I said, putting a steaming mug in front of him. "From the beginning." He took a long sip of the hot coffee, his golden eyes flickering closed for a moment. He was still a magnificent creature, but now, stripped of his clothes and his feral mystery, he was just a man. A tired, wounded man. "My pack was not like this one," he began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "We were not bloodthirsty or cruel. We believed in a different kind of strength, one rooted in community and protection, not in dominance. My uncle Jacob always believed that was a weakness. He wanted to reclaim the old ways, the savage ways. He thought I was too soft, too focused on human life." The name was a fresh sting of betrayal. The man with the friendly smile, the supposed new neighbor, was a monster. "He staged a coup," Caius continued, his voice hardening. "He had allies, wolves who saw my kindness as a flaw. They came for me in the middle of the night. I fought them, but there were too many. Jacob, he was the one who shot me. He used a silver-tipped bullet. It's what we use for rogue wolves, for those we can't save. It's poison to us." He paused, a flash of pure, agonizing pain in his eyes. I ran. I shifted and ran. I was barely conscious. I knew they would track me, so I hid my scent as best I could. I was bleeding out, losing my form. I knew I couldn't shift back to my human self. I had to become something else. A dog. A dog is a wolf in a different skin. A wolf that can live among humans. It was my only way to survive. I didn't know how long I would hold the form. I just needed to hide until I healed. My heart ached for him. He had been a king, a leader, and had been forced to hide in the form of a creature he was meant to rule. It was a life of quiet desperation and isolation, a life I had so foolishly thought was just a stray dog's. "I found you," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate whisper. "And you didn't see a dog. You saw a wounded creature. You saw me. You saved me, Ellie. And every day I spent with you, I felt myself healing, not just from the bullet, but from the darkness of my past. You brought me back to the light." The words were so raw, so honest that I couldn't deny them. He hadn't been a monster. He had been a survivor. And I had saved him. "Jacob, he must have followed my scent all this way," he said, the old wariness returning to his eyes. "He's smart. He's patient. He'll test you, he'll try to turn you against me. He'll use my past against me. He'll use my fated bond to turn me into the monster he wants me to be. You must not let him." I took his hand, my fingers wrapping around his. The calloused, strong grip was so familiar, but now it was a human hand. A hand of a man I was starting to understand, starting to trust. "I won't let him," I promised, the words feeling like a vow. "I'll help you. We'll fight him. Together. He looked at me for a long moment, a flicker of something in his eyes. It was no longer possessiveness. It was a fierce, protective love. The kind of love a wolf has for its pack, a king has for his queen. The kind of love that could change a person. The kind of love that could save a life. We sat there for a long time, the silence no longer tense but a silent promise. I had found a love I never knew existed, a love that was dangerous and wild, but a love that was also true. We were two broken people, a woman with a broken heart and a king with a shattered pack. But together, maybe, just maybe, we could heal each other. And so Ellie and Caius's story comes to a close. A shattered heart found solace in a wounded creature, and a fallen king found his strength in a gentle healer. Their love, forged in fire and betrayal, became the foundation of a new life, a new pack, a new way of being. They proved that true strength isn't about dominance, but about protection, and that even the most broken of hearts can find a home. Thank you for listening to I Adopted a Stray Dog, who turned out to be a possessive alpha. If you loved this story and want to dive deeper into a world of fated mates, powerful alphas and unexpected romance, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories that will make your heart race and your imagination soar. Leave a comment below with your favorite part of Ellie and Caius's journey. I love hearing from you. Until next time, happy reading.